Have you ever made a bold promise to yourself, maybe on New Year's Eve or after a particularly frustrating day? You tell yourself, this time will be different. I'll eat healthier, stop procrastinating, wake up earlier, finally quit smoking. And yet, within a week or even just a few days, you find yourself slipping right back into the same old patterns, as if some invisible force is pulling you there. It's not that you don't want to change, you do. You might even feel incredibly motivated in the moment. But despite that desire, your actions keep circling back to the routine. Why is it that willpower, even when fueled by strong motivation, seems to fade so quickly while habits feel almost indestructible? That's the question we're going to explore today. We'll break down how your brain actually works against raw willpower, why it defaults to routine, and how you can use the science of neuroplasticity to rebuild habits that stick without relying on constant self-control. The first thing you need to know is this: willpower is like a battery. It works, but it drains. Imagine waking up in the morning with a full charge. As the day goes on, every decision you make drains that battery a little more. What to wear, what to eat, how to respond to emails, whether to go to the gym or skip it, each choice costs energy. This phenomenon is called ego depletion. It explains why you can spend an entire day making good decisions only to find yourself giving into fast food or endless scrolling late at night. The battery is empty. Habits, however, don't drain your battery in the same way. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't argue with yourself about whether to do it. You don't weigh the pros and cons. You simply walk to the bathroom and brush. No effort, no negotiation, no battery drain. That's because habits live in a different part of the brain than willpower. Willpower depends on the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that handles conscious decisions, weighing options, and self-control. Habits, on the other hand, are stored in the basal ganglia, a deeper structure that specializes in automating behaviors. When an action becomes a habit, the prefrontal cortex essentially steps back and lets the basal ganglia take over. This frees up mental energy, which is why habits feel effortless while willpower feels exhausting. The problem is that your brain doesn't care if the habit is good or bad. It only cares whether the behavior is repeated often enough to become automatic. That's why lighting a cigarette, opening social media, or grabbing junk food can feel just as natural as brushing your teeth. Once the pattern is locked in, your brain runs it on autopilot. To understand how strong this autopilot is, picture a well-worn path in a forest. Every day you walk down the same trail, and over time the dirt gets packed, the grass dies, and it becomes easier to follow. That's your habit loop. Now imagine trying to blaze a new trail through thick grass and bushes. It takes effort, it feels awkward, and part of you keeps looking back at the old path because it's easier. This is why willpower alone struggles against habits. It's like trying to push your way through the overgrowth every single day without first clearing a path. But here's the hopeful part. Your brain is not fixed. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself, means you can carve new trails. Every time you repeat a new behavior, you strengthen that neural pathway. At the same time, when you stop walking the old trail, it slowly begins to fade. The key is consistency, not intensity. You don't need to hack down the forest in one day. You just need to walk the new path often enough for it to become easier than the old one. This is where most people misunderstand change. They think they need more willpower, when what they actually need is a strategy for building habits that bypass the need for willpower altogether. Let's make this practical. Suppose you want to exercise regularly. If you rely on willpower, you'll likely debate with yourself each day. Do I feel like it today? Do I have time? Do I have the energy? That mental tug-of-war burns out your battery. Instead, you can design a habit loop. A habit loop has three parts: cue, routine, and reward. The cue is what triggers the behavior. The routine is the behavior itself. The reward is what reinforces it. For example, you might set your workout clothes next to your bed at night. That's the cue. In the morning, when you see the clothes, you put them on. That's the routine. After the workout, you give yourself a small reward, maybe a healthy smoothie or simply the satisfaction of checking it off on a calendar. Over time, the loop strengthens. You don't need to argue with yourself each morning because the behavior becomes automatic. Another powerful technique is habit stacking. This means attaching a new habit to an existing one so that the old habit becomes the cue for the new one. For instance, if you already make coffee every morning, you could add the habit of writing one sentence in a journal while the coffee brews. The existing routine of making coffee becomes the anchor for the new behavior. The beauty of habit stacking is that you're not trying to summon willpower from thin air. You're piggybacking on something you already do without effort. But what about breaking bad habits? This is where things get tricky. Because you can't just erase a habit. The brain doesn't work that way. What you can do is replace it. Remember the habit loop? Cue, routine, reward. The cue often stays the same, but you can swap the routine. Let's say your cue is stress. Your routine might be grabbing junk food. The reward is temporary comfort. If you want to change this habit, you need to keep the cue and the reward, but change the routine. Instead of reaching for food, maybe you take a short walk or practice a breathing exercise. It might not feel natural at first, but with repetition, the brain learns to associate the cue with the new routine, and the old one begins to weaken. Another practical trick is to make bad habits harder and good habits easier. Behavioral scientists call this friction. If you want to quit smoking, don't carry cigarettes. If you want to eat healthier, keep fruit visible on the counter and hide the junk food in the back of the pantry. If you want to reduce social media use, log out after each session or move the apps to a folder on the last page of your phone. Small changes in friction can make a huge difference because your brain naturally prefers the path of least resistance. Let's pause here and address something important. None of this means you're weak if you struggle with willpower. It means you're human. Your brain is wired this way. Understanding that takes away the shame and replaces it with strategy. Instead of beating yourself up for failing, you can focus on building systems that work with your brain rather than against it. And here's another insight. Motivation is overrated. Motivation is like a spark. It gets you started, but it's unreliable. Habits are the fuel that keep you going even when the spark dies out. That's why people who succeed long-term aren't necessarily more motivated than you. They simply have built habits that carry them forward when motivation fades. Think about brushing your teeth again. You don't need motivation for it, and yet you never skip it. Imagine if going for a walk, cooking a healthy meal, or meditating felt as automatic as brushing your teeth. That's the power of habits. The science of habit formation also explains why willpower-heavy approaches like strict diets or extreme workout challenges often fail. They demand constant decision-making and restraint, which quickly depletes your battery. That's why after a month of strict dieting, people rebound even harder. The brain rebels against constant willpower use. The solution isn't to fight harder, it's to design smarter. And the smartest way is to use habit-based strategies. At this point, you might be wondering, how long does it actually take to form a habit? You've probably heard the myth of 21 days to build a habit. The truth is more nuanced. Research from University College London found that it takes, on average, 66 days for a new behavior to become automatic. But the range can be anywhere from 18 days to 254 days, depending on the complexity of the habit and the individual. The key isn't the exact number of days, but the principle of repetition. Every time you repeat the behavior, you're casting a vote for the person you want to become. This is why identity-based habits are so powerful. Instead of saying, "I want to run 3 times a week," you say, "I am a runner." Instead of, "I want to eat more vegetables," you say, "I am the kind of person who chooses nourishing food." When you tie habits to your identity, you reinforce them with every action. Skipping a run isn't just missing a workout. It conflicts with who you believe you are. That dissonance motivates consistency in a way that willpower alone cannot. This identity shift is also why relapse doesn't mean failure. If you see yourself as someone trying to quit smoking and you have a cigarette, it feels like proof that you've failed. But if you see yourself as a non-smoker who slipped once, the story is different. One slip doesn't erase the identity, so you're more likely to get back on track. In other words, habits shape identity, but identity also shapes habits. They reinforce each other. You don't need to get it perfect. You just need to show up consistently enough for the new identity to take root. Another reason habits overpower willpower is the role of cues in your environment. You might think your behavior is driven by conscious decisions, but most of it is triggered by context. If you always eat snacks while watching TV, simply sitting on the couch can make your brain crave food, even if you're not hungry. The environment becomes a silent partner in your habit loop. That's why people who try to quit smoking find it hardest when they're around friends who smoke or in places they associate with cigarettes. Your brain wires context and behavior together so tightly that one automatically activates the other. This is called context-dependent memory, and it's why changing your environment can be one of the most effective strategies for changing habits. Instead of relying on sheer willpower to resist, you can redesign your surroundings to make the desired behavior easier and the undesired one harder. Want to drink more water? Keep a bottle within arm's reach at all times. Want to stop eating late-night junk food? Don't keep it in the house. Environment often beats motivation because your brain takes the path of least resistance. Here's something else that's important. Your habits don't just dictate what you do, They shape how you see yourself. Every repeated action is like a vote for the kind of person you believe you are. When you keep promises to yourself, even small ones, you reinforce an identity of reliability and strength. When you break them, you reinforce the opposite. This is why habit building is so powerful. It doesn't just change your behavior, it changes your self-image. And once your identity shifts, habits become self-sustaining. A runner doesn't have to force themselves to run. They run because it's who they are. This identity-based approach is far more effective than relying on willpower alone because it aligns your actions with your sense of self. Now let's talk about why forceful approaches often backfire. When you rely purely on self-discipline, you create internal resistance. Think of it like holding a beach ball underwater. You can keep it down for a while, but the pressure builds until it bursts back up. This is why strict diets, extreme challenges, or resolutions often collapse. They depend on continuous suppression instead of building systems that remove the struggle. A healthier approach is gentle consistency. Instead of telling yourself, "I'll never eat sugar again," you might say, "I'll replace one sugary snack with fruit each day." This doesn't trigger the same level of inner rebellion. The brain interprets small, manageable changes as safe, and over time they accumulate into transformation. This principle of incrementalism is deeply supported by neuroscience. Each small change rewires neural circuits through repetition. At first, the old pathways scream louder because they're stronger, but as you continue, the new pathways gain strength until they become dominant. The resistance fades, and what once felt impossible becomes automatic. Another powerful tool is to build rituals. Rituals are different from habits because they carry symbolic meaning. For example, lighting a candle before meditation or tying your shoes in a specific way before exercise signals to your brain that something important is beginning. This reduces uncertainty and makes the transition smoother. Rituals calm the nervous system because they provide predictability, and predictability reduces fear. Over time, the ritual itself becomes a comforting anchor that helps you stick with the new habit. Let's also address the role of emotion. Habits are not just logical, they are emotional. The reward at the end of a habit loop is often emotional comfort, relief from stress, a sense of pleasure, or a feeling of control. If you ignore the emotional component, you'll struggle to change habits because your brain craves that feeling. To rewire a habit, you need to provide an alternative emotional payoff. If stress leads you to procrastinate, the new habit you create must also reduce stress, not just check off a task. That might mean breaking work into tiny steps and celebrating progress, so you feel relief and accomplishment without avoidance. You're not fighting the brain, you're redirecting it. One mistake people make is interpreting resistance as weakness. They think, "If I were stronger, I could push through." But in reality, resistance is simply the nervous system doing its job. It's protecting you from the unknown. When you reframe resistance not as a wall but as a signal, you can respond differently. Instead of fighting it, you can acknowledge it, breathe through it, and take a small step forward anyway. This is how courage is built, not by eliminating fear, but by learning to act alongside it. Let's put this into a practical exercise. Think of one habit you want to build and one you want to break. Write down the cue, the routine, and the reward for each. Then, design a replacement loop. Keep the cue and the reward, but swap the routine. Next, identify one way to reduce friction for the good habit and one way to increase friction for the bad one. Finally, decide on a small ritual that will signal to your brain that you're entering the new habit. By writing this down, you're not just thinking about change, you're programming it. Remember, change doesn't happen in one giant leap. It happens in dozens of small choices that accumulate over time. Your habits are stronger than willpower because they are designed to conserve energy, and your brain always prioritizes energy efficiency. But by using cues, environment, rituals, and emotional rewards, you can align that efficiency with the life you want to live. And here's the big takeaway. You don't need to become a different person overnight. You just need to act like the person you want to become in small, consistent ways. Each time you do, you strengthen that identity until it becomes effortless. Over time, you'll look back and realize the transformation didn't happen through force, but through design. Habits are stronger than willpower, but that's not a curse, it's a gift. It means you don't have to exhaust yourself trying to be disciplined forever. You can build systems that carry you when motivation runs out. And once those systems are in place, they free up your mind and energy for the things that truly matter. If this exploration helped you see your habits in a new light and gave you practical tools to reshape them, I invite you to carry it forward. Like this video if it resonated with you, share it with someone who might be struggling with the same patterns, and subscribe to Mind Unlocked. Together, we'll keep turning psychology and philosophy into practical wisdom, a toolkit for better thinking so you can live with more clarity, resilience, and meaning.